What's going on, everybody? Here we are, Monday. Monday is the day we talk about my question to all of you last week. Now, let me first start by saying this. I've got a cold. You can hear it in my voice. I'm going to battle through this week. I'm not going to go on the DL unless I have to go on the DL. So I'm going to power through. I'm not like one of these soft guys nowadays. I'm going to go all the way through. I'm going to battle through it. And my voice hurts, but it's okay. We'll keep going and we'll come out on the other side and we'll be just fine. So bear with my voice. Second thing I want to say, something I haven't pointed out for a while. My good friend Scott at Reindeer Studios. There are not many guys that are better guys than Scott. You know, he has Midlife card shirts on his Etsy store. His Etsy store, if you go to Etsy and you just type in Reindeer Studios and you filter over to YouTube channels or YouTube, you can buy a Midlife shirt. How cool is this? So support my buddy Scott. I don't get proceeds for it. It's his business. But support my buddy Scott at Reindeer Studios. And hey, show your Midlife Nation pride. I encourage you to do it. I've got several. But I haven't mentioned that in a while, and I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, I got to remind people, you can buy your Midlife shirts over at Etsy, Reindeer Studios. Now, this question from last week, I said, look into your crystal ball. What do you think is going to happen in the card world in 2025? We've just opened up. We're wrapping up January this week. What do you think's going to happen? And I kind of left it at that. And boy, was there a variety of answers and responses. And I thought they were pretty interesting. And there were some people who said, I think this, and other people thought the exact opposite. And we're going to take a look at those. Great responses. What's going to happen? Well, none of us know, but it's definitely going to be interesting to see what this next year looks like. Especially as we change from, one political administration to another. Will that help things? Will that hurt things? Now, again, I'm not going to get into politics, but what I will say is it's going to be interesting. We're going to take a look at your responses here. But first, I also wanted to point this out. First time I'm sharing this, a week from tomorrow, Tuesday, February 4th. Will be Midlife Live number 2. We will be doing a live stream. So mark your calendars. This is going to be at 5:30 p.m. Pacific. That's 8:30 p.m. Eastern. So 8:30 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, February 4th will be Midlife Live number 2. Now let me tell you, my goal, what I want to have is a panel of me plus 3, gives us 4 on the screen. I've got 2 are for sure's and I've got a probably. And this panel is not going to let you down. They are names, they are faces that you will recognize. You will enjoy their thoughts. More on that later in the week. But I just wanted to plant that seed, and I'll be sharing more about what we'll be talking about and who will be included over the next few days. That said, let's take a look at the first response of predictions for cards for 2025. Check it out. Now, this response says the 1980s gap will start to close. Hey, Greg, great video per usual. Here's a hobby prediction for 2025, coming from another 40-something. I think key rookie cards from the 1980s in a 9 grade will get way more love than they do now. I realize pop counts on many key cards from the 80s are high-ish, but let me throw some interesting examples out there. 1982 Fleer Cal Ripken Jr. PSA 10 recent sale, $3,350. PSA 9 recent sale, $90.11. One more, 1984 Donruss Don Mattingly, recent PSA 10,
$3,383. Recent PSA 9, $199.95. Either PSA 10s from this era will come crashing down, or I think there is some opportunity to pick up mint copies, 9 grade, of key 1980s rookies for pretty cheap. I think these types of PSA 9, SGC 9, or 9.5 have room to move higher in 2025. Yes, they are early borderline junk wax era cards, but finding these cards well centered, without tilt, etc., can be maddening. Also, us 40-somethings have some money to spend now, and nostalgia is a powerful thing. Curious to get your take on that. Thanks.
All right. I think some really good points are made here. And there are a lot of directions I could go with this response. First off, let's talk nostalgia. Nostalgia is real. Let's talk sports cards. A huge piece of cards. And what makes them successful is marketing. Greg, what are you talking about? Give me a second. I will explain what I'm talking about. Marketing is huge for sports cards. It's why all the social media is going. That's why all the YouTubes are going. Marketing is a massive part of cards. Topps Heritage cards are a perfect example of where marketing meets nostalgia. So essentially what they're doing with Topps Heritage is they're the set from 50 years ago. We just had Topps Heritage 2024. It was the 75 top set. Why is it the 75 top set? And who is the target for Topps Heritage cards? Well, the reason it's the set from 50 years ago is it's because all of the guys that were 10 years old, right? They were 10 years old in 1985. They looked at that 75 set as like, whoa, that's the old set. The people who opened packs in 1975, that group are the people who now have money, right? The people who are between 40 is really when a lot of people start to actually have some money to spend on things. And so from 40 to 50 to 60, those are the people who are really the most nostalgic. They're looking back on their childhood. They're starting to go, man, I've got some aches and pains. I can't see that well. I gotta put my glasses on to see. And we start looking back at our childhood and remembering those glory days. Our kids are starting to get older. Because our kids are getting older, we're starting to rediscover our own hobbies. In Topps Heritage, it's not a coincidence that each year, it's basically 49, 50 years ago, that set is the Topps Heritage set. It's because they're trying to have a release of cards that is designed at our age group, right? They're not the shiny cards. Why? Because the 40 to 60-year-olds aren't as into the shiny cards. They said those people want nostalgic cards. Those people want the memories. So that's what Topps Heritage is doing, is it's selling the memories with today's players. That's not a coincidence. Greg, what are you talking about? How does this how does this relate to the answer to this question? The reason it relates to the answer to this question is because the response here is his hypothesis is that cards from the 80s are really going to start to go up in value, the nines, because those of us that collected in the 80s are now 40, 45, 50 years old. And we want to collect the cards from our childhood that we couldn't buy. And there's no doubt that there is a lot of that happening. And there will probably be more of that happening. When I have friends that aren't really that into collecting and they come over, I'll be honest with you, more of them raise eyebrows when I show them my Cal Ripken rookie card or my Wade Boggs rookie card or my Ryan Sandberg rookie card than like an old Ernie Banks, because they remember wanting those cards as a kid. I think that this is a really good point. Now, the other part of this question, though, is what in the heck is going on with tens? The fact, if we cracked every 10 and every 9 and we put them side by side and said, all right, pick the tens, I don't think many people, very, very, very few people would be able to identify the tens. If I hid 3 tens in a stack of 10 cards and the rest were 9s, I'd be willing to bet that most people probably would not be able to pick out which ones were the 10s. So if that is actually true, why are the 10s selling for 30, 40, 50 times the price of a 9? If we're buying the card, if we're collecting cards, let's just take a step back. I guess I'm making an assumption. If we are actually collecting sports cards, why would a Mattingly 84 Donruss in a 9 sell for $200, but in a 10 sell for $3,300 or whatever it was? Why would that happen? The only reason why that would happen is if people actually aren't buying cards, they're actually buying slabs. I think that this prediction is a good one. Something's going to happen. Either the 10 prices are going to finally collapse, or the 9s will go up. I think it's more likely that the 10s collapse, because it didn't used to be this way. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, the difference between a 9 and a 10 wasn't 30 times. It was not 30 times. Now it is. That's crazy town. Now, I'm not trying to say that if you collect 10s, you're wrong and you should only collect 9s. But if you can't notice a difference between the two, why is one worth 30 times as much?
Some people think that card values will be dropping. This one says, I was the one that asked that last year. Here is my prediction for what will happen in 2025. The year was highly volatile, and inflation hurt the lower and middle class worst of all. Card values and demand as a whole will decline. Only the most desirable of card collectible will increase, if at all. Many influencers of the hobby will disappear, and many breakers will cease to be relevant. I've told you for 6 months, card values will decline. I'm holding firm to this in 2025.
All right, so this commenter, this person has comments frequently, is a definitely a member of Midlife Nation, definitely is a participant, and has absolutely and I recognize the username and everything, and has definitely been beating the drum of cards are gonna go down in value. And he says, you say that it's been for the last 6 months. I think it's been more like a year. And when I was asked last year, and I answered the question that I guess you're the one that asked, I didn't remember that part. I said I thought things would be pretty stable for the year because it was an election year. And in election years, generally, there's not huge ups or huge downs in the economy. It's just kind of, there's not massive changes. And I think for the most part, that's what happened. But there are going to be changes in the economy. Whether they end up being for the good or the bad, we'll find out. I don't know. If I knew, I would be out buying stock futures, not baseball cards. But cards definitely shot up, and they shot up during the junk wax era. We all know because there was a lot of money being printed, and inflation went through the roof, and money was being handed out, and people were receiving COVID checks, and they were staying home, and they couldn't go out and spend money on vacations. They couldn't go out to movies. They couldn't go out on entertainment. So they were buying tangible items, and they were buying tangible items that were easy to ship. And that's one of the areas a lot of money went. And obviously things collapsed. The question is, and I do think that in all markets, some cards will go down in value. And I think in all markets, some cards will go up in value. I mean, even during the COVID boom, there was some stuff that wasn't going up. Most stuff was going up, but not everything was going up. And I think the question is, okay, some cards are going to go down over the next year. I think that's absolutely fair to say. But I absolutely think some cards will go up over the next year. You know, a lot of people, I mean, for me personally, I look at a lot of the stuff that over the last year has been on my list. You know, Darren and I make these, goal lists of cards that we're interested in. And the prices of those cards haven't been going down. I wish they were going down because then they would be cheaper. Those cards have been staying the same. But there are some cards that have been going down. And specifically the cards that have been going down that I feel like I've seen is a lot of the lower to mid grade stuff. The cards in 2s, 3s, 4s of even big name players. Sandy Koufax, Roberto Clemente, Willie Mays, Hank Aaron. 2s, 3s, 4s of those guys are definitely cheaper this year, right now, than they were 12 months ago. But there are a lot of things that are a lot higher as well. There are a lot of cards that have not gone down and have gone way up. And those tend to be, I mean, some of the high grade stuff has not gone down. It's gone up. And part of that might be because when the supply is so small of like a high-end 1914 Cracker Jack card. Like those cards are setting record prices right now. They're setting record prices. While these cards from, a 68 tops Willie McCovey or Willie Mays or Sandy Koufax in a 3 is not set. It's setting. It's low. It's really low. So not everything is going to go down. Not everything is going to go up. But I do think that what you're saying is true. That if money is tight, certain things go by the wayside, and the people that are most affected when energy prices are up, when food prices are up, when insurance prices are up, it's not the ultra wealthy. It's not the person who can buy the 1914, Cracker Jack, I don't know, Christy Mathewson in a 5. That person's not as affected because food prices went up by 15%. It's the guy who's buying the PSA 2, 3, and 4 1968 Willie Mays and Hank Aaron. That's the guy who's getting the squeeze. So, yes, I think what the economy does obviously affects what money we have available for things like cards and entertainment and hobbies. But some things are more exempt from that. And the higher end stuff kind of is. And there's going to be a couple of comments about that here coming up in just a minute.
Some people think the high-end cards will continue climbing. This first comment says 2025 predictions. Number 1. More and more midlife viewers will pair their collections, exchanging quantity for quality in a more intentional way than ever before. Number 2. Vintage cards in the $20 to $250 range will continue to decline in value. SGC slabs will continue to present the better short-term deals for collectors. Number 3, vintage stars in high grade, collector grade plus will hold value and even rise slightly. PSA slabs will continue to yield more long-term value for high-end vintage cards. And another comment says, I thought we saw some new all-time highs for a lot of scarce cards and cards with high eye appeal in 2024. I think this trend continues. Uber rare and scarce cards will continue to come to be auctioned off at some crazy prices, and fantastic looking cards for their grades will continue. More and more vintage collectors are becoming more discerning in how they go about choosing their cards. Edit. I made this comment before watching your video with Darren. Sounds like we have some same predictions.
So those two comments are kind of in line with what I was starting to say a minute ago, which is the high eye appeal. And when you talk high grade, and the first comment I think calls it like collector grade plus sort of thing, like really nice looking vintage stars, a really nice looking high end 54 tops Hank Aaron rookie card. Like when there's a really nice copy of that card and it's got great eye appeal, like the second comment points out, those cards aren't going down recently. Those cards are going up. And again, why are those going up while other things are going down? Well, some people are struggling some with economic issues. That's not affecting others. And so it only takes two people when a card is at auction. It only takes two people that have money to afford a card for the card's price to go high. So it does feel like eye appeal in vintage cards, especially pre-war cards, and high grade. And now we say, oh, what do you mean high grade? It's not about the grade, Greg. No, it's not about the grade, but generally, not always, a card with a high grade has high eye appeal. Now, I do occasionally we all see a 7 from time to time that's not a particularly attractive card because maybe it's way off center or there's some print marks or something that drives us crazy. But when we say high grade, it just means like a really, really nice example. And the really nice examples that look really good, they don't seem to be going down. Now tell me if I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, say, Greg, no, you're wrong. But I feel like at least the cards that I have my eye on, the T206 Ty Cobb red portrait, the Cy Young portrait T206, the 53 tops Jackie Robinson, the cards that I am coveting, those prices haven't gone down. And the high eye appeal ones are it feels like they're setting record prices. Now, the first comment has some things to say about SGC versus PSA. And I feel like something is happening right now with PSA and SGC, and I can't quite put my finger on it. I have a couple of ideas. And let me throw this out there. I've got a video coming out later this week that you are absolutely not going to want to miss. Someone in Midlife Nation decided to do an experiment and sent me the results. And my head, I think, exploded. keep an eye out for that later in the week. But PSA and SGC, couple of things are happening. PSA just had a price increase. Right after, PSA just announced a backlog. So they announced a backlog, and then like, we're backed up, we're having a hard time, so much is coming in. And then like 2 or 3 days later, they raised their prices. Let me ask everybody, tinfoil hat just got put on. It kind of looks like I have a tinfoil hat on, actually. If they hadn't said they have a backlog, like I haven't heard anybody say this. I'm just asking a question. If they hadn't just said, we have this big backlog, we're really backed up, we're getting too many submissions, we can't process everything, before they announced their price increase, if they just said, we're raising our prices, don't you think more people would have been upset? Don't you think people would have been way more upset about a price increase if they hadn't just, like 2 days earlier, said, man, we're getting so many submissions, we have a backlog? Or were maybe those two things coordinated? Or were maybe those things, we're going to tell everyone we have a backlog, which is why we're running long, which, by the way, they've been running long for like a year. You know, a 30-day submission is not 30 days. Hasn't been in a long time. It's been 35 to 45. But just suddenly, they say, yeah, we're behind, we're running long. Make this big announcement. And then they say, we're raising our prices. Coincidence? Something is happening right now, and I'm not really sure what is going on. And that's why I'm going to be talking more about that topic of SGC and PSA later in this video, but also for next week's.
Some people think SGC may start to drop. This first one says, Fanatics buys Collector's Universe. They want to own it all. Then they retire the SGC brand. And another says, hi, Greg, great video. My prediction is that I think we see an increased liquidity for vintage cards. PSA's partnership with eBay, combined with its new offers, feature a dominant position in the marketplace and will increase the ability for desirable graded cards to move. I've used both features already for graded vintage cards, and I've been very pleased with the results. That has allowed me to easily move a decent volume of mid-level cards and save for bigger Grail cards without any of the typical hassles associated with selling cards. I also think that if Collector's Universe does not implement these features for SGC, there is a possibility SGC begins to lose some of its market share.
All right, so what do we think? That first prediction was probably the most bold prediction. He says, I think Fanatics is going to buy out Collector's Universe, and then I think they're going to end SGC. Oh my, I hope that doesn't happen. I don't think that's going to happen. I hope it doesn't happen. I'm all about competition. I'm all about more grading companies. I'm all about multiple options, not fewer. That would be bad. If that happens, I will say this. I hope that they make Peter Steinberg the head of PSA, because I think Peter Steinberg is fantastic. But what do we think is going to happen with SGC? Now, the second comment pointed out something I think is also very interesting. So, Collectors, the holding company that owns SGC and PSA now, right? That was about a year ago that Collectors bought out SGC. They've got these partnerships with eBay. So you can send your card from your house to PSA, get it graded, have it sent to the vault, and then have it listed on eBay. So depending on how the grade goes, if the grade comes in high, you go, oh man, I want to sell it, I want to flip it. Then you can sell it on eBay through PSA without the card ever coming back to your house. And the second comment says it's a great service. It's really effective. I love it. I've used it. It's very beneficial. Why doesn't SGC have that? Why doesn't SGC have that option? Now, my understanding is that what Nat Turner has said is that he's planning on doing that. He's planning on extending this over to SGC as well. But why? What are we waiting for then? I don't understand. Why when I go to the National, as PSA have this massive booth right by the front door, and then over in the back corner is SGC? They're the same company. They're owned by the same company. Collectors owns both. Why wouldn't they be side by side? PSA has this partnership with eBay, making it really easy to grade and then immediately sell on eBay. Why doesn't SGC have that? Why does only PSA have that? What's the difference? Seems like it would be really easy to fire that up at both. Why wouldn't that be going on at both? Unless they didn't want it to be going on at both. See, the thing about business is every time a decision is made, they make a decision that is best for the company, ideally. So if they're doing this for PSA, but they're not doing it for SGC, isn't that telling us something? Isn't it telling us something when you walk into the National and there's literally red carpet all around the PSA booth, which is massive? And in the far back corner, the furthest possible place in the whole National from PSA is the SGC booth, back behind the Breakers Pavilion. Aren't they telling us something? When PSA is still grading on site at the National and SGC is in the back corner and they say, I know we've been grading on site at the National for the last 2 years, but we can't this year. Because remember, we announced the backlog like 3 weeks ago? Isn't that telling us something? Now, what are they telling us? Well, at the very least, what they're telling us, at the very least, they're telling us that the priority is PSA. When you go onto the Collectors Universe website, check it out. Don't take my word for it. It's got PSA plastered all over the place. You have to search for the SGC stuff. Why? Because they're telling us something. Now, there's no doubt that the priority is PSA for collectors. The question is, where are we going from here?
Some people say PSA is going to start to fade. This first comment says, my prediction for the 2025 card market is this. I feel that PSA will lose some market share and other grading companies will surprise. With PSA having many issues with maintaining the service expected by customers, people will switch to other companies to get their cards graded. PSA has already raised their prices on their services this month, and yet they are slow to return those cards to their customers, rarely ever getting them back within the expected time. SGC is obviously a much more affordable and efficient operation, and other newer companies are springing up. BGS, BVG may also make a comeback after years of declining. The fact is that PSA is not only the most expensive grader slabbers, but they are also the worst at getting the job done in a timely manner, and many of those grades are suspect. PSA has grown so rapidly that they have been forced to hire less experienced graders, and their reputation will take a hit because of it. And another says, "Hi Greg, another good Q&A. I'm going to go out on a limb on your question for next week and say that we begin to see a major shift away from PSA from vintage collectors. This could mean going to another company such as SGC, or even a new company or a rebranded company entering the field of play."
So right after, we have some of us, and again, when I asked the question last week, what are your predictions for the hobby for 2025? I didn't say in regards to grading, in regards to PSA, in regards to SGC. I just say, what are your predictions for the hobby for this year? And an overwhelming number of the responses had to do with PSA and SGC. And a lot of us who hate grading, and a lot of people hate grading, and that's fine. Say, well, I can't believe we're talking about grading. But here's the deal. Grading is so intertwined with the hobby at this point, even if you only collect raw cards, because I know I'm going to get the responses. This is why I collect raw cards only, Greg. I get it, but what's happening with PSA and what's happening with SGC, what's going to happen with either, which we don't know what it is going to affect the whole hobby, whether you like it or not. It just is. So we have to be aware and we have to be ready for that. Now, in these last couple of responses, it's, PSA's slow, PSA is more expensive, they're going to have to take a hit because they don't have the customer service of some of the other companies. But kind of like what we were saying a minute ago, if PSA has the red carpet at the National, if PSA is grading on site, and some of you on the last question were probably screaming at the screen, don't forget to mention, Greg, that PSA has a set registry and SGC still doesn't. They still don't have a set registry. How do they not still have a set registry? And PSA has all these things set up with eBay where you could send it to the vault and immediately list it and immediately sell it and it just quickly easier. Is PSA really going to take a hit? I mean, the number of slabs that they do each month continues to go up. It's over 1 million in a month. They're at almost 1.5 million grades per month. Are they really going to go away? They are still the industry standard, whether people like it or not. And when they continue to have advantages over SGC, when they continue to have things that SGC doesn't, is PSA really going to go away? I don't think they're going to go away. I don't think they're going to go away. The way that PSA keeps their advantage is by SGC not being allowed to grade at the National, to have a registry, to have that same partnership with eBay. So why would they be doing that? Why are they doing that? If Collectors owns these two companies and they want them both to be successful and make money, why does PSA get all these things that SGC doesn't? And I'll say this for the 100th time. I couldn't like Peter Steinberg more than I do. I don't blame Peter Steinberg for this stuff. Peter Steinberg is the head of SGC. I think Peter's a straight shooter. I think Peter cares about collectors. I think Peter is all about customer service. I think Peter's fantastic. I think Peter is probably frustrated that he doesn't have a set registry. I think Peter is probably frustrated that he doesn't have the partnership where people can send directly from SGC to eBay. I think Peter is frustrated that he didn't get to grade at the National on site last year. Who cares about grading on site, Greg? Most of us don't go to the National. That's the response that I hear a lot. I don't want him to grade at the National, Greg, because at the National, if they're grading there, it's going to slow down the submissions for the rest of us who don't go to the National. Most people don't go to the National, so we don't want on-site grading. We want the fast turnaround to stay. But if SGC wants to have some of the best cards in their slabs, people don't want to mail a $200,000 card through the mail to get slabbed. People want to have it in their backpack and bring it and hand it to Peter in person. I know of at least 2 people who have massive cards. And the reason that they haven't sent it to SGC is because they don't want to mail it. They want to hand it over. So one of the reasons on-site grading is so important at the National is because it gets some of those big cards into SGC's holders. Here's another question. This has turned into a whole grading video, but if PSA and SGC are on the same team now, they're owned by the same company, so shouldn't they kind of be partners if you're on the same company? And PSA has all these autograph authenticators, right? They have lots of autograph authenticators. The autograph authentication and grading, that's not slow. That's not backlogged. PSA has tons of those. When Nat Turner said, hey, I'm going to go buy SGC because they have some really good vintage graders and it's hard to find vintage graders. That was one of the main reasons he said they bought SGC, is to acquire high-end vintage graders. Well, guess what? SGC was having a hard time finding autograph authenticators. Why aren't some of the autograph authenticators that were for PSA at the disposal of SGC, since they're both owned by collectors? How come the only company that can authenticate autographs, the only label for collectors that can authenticate autographs is PSA? How come they didn't send some of their autograph authenticators over to SGC? Well, would that be potentially helping the SGC label? And isn't one of the advantages for PSA that they have autograph authentication and SGC no longer doesn't? If they want to work together, why wouldn't? So here's my question for this week. Where do you currently stand on PSA and SGC? A very simple, a very straightforward question. What is your personal opinion on PSA versus SGC? I'll leave it at that, and I look forward to your responses.